Planning Department, the City Attorney's Office, and the City's Planning Consultant, Carlisle Wortman Associates. If you wish to address the Planning Commission, please come forward to the podium when recognized and provide your name and address on the sign-in sheet. Please begin your remarks by stating your name for the benefit of the commissioners. All remarks are to be addressed to the Planning Commission, not to anyone else in the room. If you have a cell phone or any other device that might disrupt this meeting, please either switch it to silent mode or turn it off. At this time, I'd like to ask the Planning Commission Secretary to conduct the roll call. Ms. Sarnikis?
Mr. Abhedian. Ms. Cruz? Here. Mr. Edmonds? Mr. Faison?
Here.
Mr. Hudson?
Here.
Mr. Krant?
Here.
Ms. Koopa? Here. Mr. Danzica?
Here.
Mr. Tagle?
Here.
Ms. Howe?
Quorum present. Next is item number 2 on the agenda, the approval of tonight's agenda. Can I get a motion to approve tonight's agenda? Ms. Cruz, thank you. Second, Mr. Sanzica. Ms. Sarnicki?
Ms. Cruz? Yes. Mr. Faison?
Yes.
Mr. Hudson?
Here.
Mr. Krant?
Yes.
Ms. Koopa? Yes. Mr. Zanzica?
Yes.
Mr. Tagle?
Yes.
You're batting 1,000 there, Mr. Hudson.
Yeah. Can I change my response to yes?
Yes, I'd appreciate that.
Thank you.
The next item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes from the June 26, 2018 meeting. Can I get a motion to approve the minutes? Ms. Cooper.
I'll second.
Ms. Cruz, thank you. Ms. Sarnicki?
Mr. Faison?
Yes.
Mr. Hudson?
Yes.
Mr. Krant?
Yes.
Ms. Koopa? Yes. Mr. Zanzica?
Yes.
Mr. Tagle?
Yes.
Ms. Cruz?
Yes.
Motion approved. The next item is number 4, and that's for public comment for items that are not on tonight's agenda. Does anyone have a comment, public comment for items that are not an item that's not on the agenda? Yes.
I've already signed it.
Okay.
Sheet here.
And could you just identify yourself, please?
Yes, my name is Avis Landmesser. I live on Ottawa Drive.
Thank you.
I want to read this because I'm afraid I'll forget some point that I really think is important, so if you bear with me. As you know, prior to incorporation as a city, residential housing in the township developed sporadically. It had relatively large lots, had an array of house designs. And over the intervening years, those homes have become settled neighborhoods. After 1955, many entire sections of undeveloped land began transitioning from agriculture in nature to residential sites. The resultant homes were generally larger in size, similar in appearance, and all developed within the same time frame. Today, by and large, only small pockets of undeveloped land, mostly in the interior of some sections, remain available for potential residential usage. Developers are intent on squeezing as many houses into these pockets as the city zoning ordinance will allow. They are so confident that projects will pass through the system unscathed that they sometimes invest a great deal of money in real estate before they actually receive an approval on the plan. As I understand it, the cluster housing concept was reinstituted in 2016. It was intended to be an alternative to traditional residential development and would preserve more open space and natural features. It would also, quote, ensure compatibility of design in use between neighboring property. In my opinion, the GFA Square Lake proposal with 3-story cluster homes constructed on one acre of land in the interior of Section 3 certainly did not meet this criteria. Can an example of a cluster home residential proposal be cited that was ultimately rejected by the Commission? If there is one, on what basis was it rejected? And what was the final resolution of the proposal? The Assistant City Attorney and Messrs. Apahidian and Tagle have explained that if a developer of cluster homes meets the criteria of the zoning ordinance, the Commission has very little discretion to deny his petition. But in light of the growing number of citizen protests of cluster housing, perhaps that part of the zoning ordinance that addresses the density issue should be reevaluated with the realities of present-day land circumstances in mind. To that end, could the Planning Commission, the city, legally create a moratorium on cluster home developments to study this particular density issue? Additionally, more discussion by the Planning Commission regarding interpretation of ordinance language as it pertains to health, safety, and welfare may be warranted. More and more cluster home developments could, one, endanger the safety of our citizens. Again, I cite this GSA Square Lake proposal that was approved with only one ingress-egress, had a narrow 24-foot driveway and a 6-foot contiguous sidewalk. Could, two, cause mental and physical stress by dramatically increasing traffic on roads already compromised with congested traffic. And three, could affect the general welfare of our community at large by the potential overpopulation of our school system. As Ms. Cruz stated at your June 12 meeting, she perceives a trend of contention is developing between residents of established traditional neighborhoods and developers of cluster homes. And I agree. The issue is not going away, and it needs to be addressed. Thank you for your interest.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else who would like to make a comment for an item that is not on tonight's agenda? Okay, so we'll move to item number 5.
Mr. Chair, I have a question, and this may be a question for Mr. Frayne or Mr. Savedant. In light of our recent decisions to try and help educate people when they come to the meetings in terms of what the goals and things that the Planning Commission are trying to accomplish, would it be okay to maybe just talk for a second about some of the concerns that were raised, or is that not appropriate?
The concerns that were raised just now?
Yes.
I think that's something that can be discussed, but generally speaking, public comment, we don't respond to public comment. We can certainly take those comments and we can just discuss put them on an agenda at a later time for discussion. But at this point, I'm not prepared to respond to each of the points.
I think that some of her comments reflected many of the things that we're trying to educate about. So, put it on the agenda or something else is fine. Yeah.
Moving to item number 5. It's preliminary site plan review, public hearing. Preliminary site plan review, file number SP JPLN 2018-0013. Proposed West Troy Meadows, north of Waddles, west of Livernois, Section 16, currently zoned R1B, one family residential district. Mr. Savedant?
Yeah, so I'll kick this off and I'll pass the torch to Mr. Carlisle. Just a little bit of backstory. This property is a little under 20 acres in area. It's located north of Waddles and west of Livernois. An aerial photograph is on the screen here. This is a Troy School District bus garage, and this is property that's been owned by the Troy School District for decades. And as you're aware, the Troy School District purchased a number of lots that are approximately the same size decades ago, thinking that they may need these properties for schools. And our population is kind of capped out at about 80,000 people, and the school district has determined that they don't need these properties for new schools, so they've been selling them for residential development. And Mondrian has purchased so far all of the properties that have recently been for sale, and on all of those properties have proposed the single-family residential cluster development, which I'll get into it real briefly. But I just wanted to give a little bit, this one's a little bit different. It's a little bit of an outlier because this site, until less than a year ago, was earmarked for the proposed Early Childhood Learning Center that's now under construction on Square Lake, just west of Livernois. I had the opportunity to see a concept layout for this property about a year ago for the proposed Early Childhood Learning Center, which was fortuitous because school properties, and if there's any questions about the law legality, you can, Ms. Dufresne's here to answer questions, but public school properties and public schools are exempt from local zoning. So had that property moved forward as a school, the underlying zoning would not apply. So the tree protection language that applies to this development would not apply to had it been developed as a school. In fact, if you dig a little deeper scratch a little bit deeper, there are some wetlands on the property, and in theory, the school district could have mitigated the filling in of these wetlands elsewhere on other property they own in the city, and they could have clear-cut the whole site. And the drawing that I saw included over 400 students with no buses. They would have been individually dropped off at the school by their parents. So theoretically, there could have been 400 plus trips in the morning and 400 plus trips out in the afternoon. So with a site with not a lot of trees on it. So that development again that is under construction on Square Lake Road, and the impact of the school will not be felt here. Instead, the proposal is for a 42-unit detached single-family cluster development, which I'll briefly describe what those are. So I just wanted to give some background because it is, when you talk about development potential of a site, with cluster you talk about the parallel plan as a potential, which is kind of the maximum that one can develop under existing zoning. But there's also the fact that this was a school property and had the potential to be a 400 plus student school. So as was indicated, why is that not up there? Sorry. It's on my screen, but it's not up there.
It's on the side.
It's on the side screen.
It was for a second.
Is your connection loose?
No, because the PDF.
You broke it.
Thanks for that.
There you go. It's on the side behind you and in front of you. There it is.
Boom. Okay. So, in an effort to educate, inform, be transparent, we're trying to incorporate PowerPoint presentations when we present these projects. So, we hear this word cluster a lot. Lately, it seems that residents use the word cluster to define something that's dense, perhaps more dense than they're used to seeing. But really, that's not really the true meaning of the word cluster. So what is a cluster development? It's a zoning concept, and it involves grouping homes or clustering homes, scrunching the homes closer to each other within a development so that the remaining land on the site, the land that you were able to preserve, can be used as open space. And this is done for a number of reasons, including preserving natural features, permitting creative design, preserving the character of the area, and reducing infrastructure costs by potentially lengthening the amount of sidewalks, roads, sewers, etc. In a development. So to give you a very brief background on how we do this, there's 3 sketches up here. The one on the left is a fictional property. It's very simplistic. But it's a base property. It's got some wetlands in blue and some wooded areas in dark green. That's the property we're dealing with in this imaginary world. So the middle drawing is a parallel plan. A parallel plan, as I mentioned earlier, is theoretically the maximum number of units that can be developed under the existing zoning district, meeting all the minimum requirements of the zoning ordinance. In this case, this yields 60 lots. They're all about half an acre in area without sewer, and if there is sewer, 10,500 square feet. To the far right is applying the cluster ordinance. Now, what our cluster ordinance says is, in order to qualify, the very first thing a developer has to do is preserve at least 20% open space. By preserving 20% open space, the developer then qualifies for a 20% bonus. So you add 20%, they've preserved the 20% open space, they've picked up a 20% bonus above their parallel plan, which was 60. 20% of 60 is 12. You add the 60 to the 12, 72 units. So that represents what could theoretically happen by applying the cluster development, preserving some wetlands, and preserving at least 20% open space. Now, there's more incentive. If a developer preserves 30% open space, they get a 30% bonus. 40%, they get a 40% bonus. What Ben's going to mention tonight is this developer has exceeded 40% open space in this development. But that's a snapshot of what we're trying to accomplish with the cluster ordinance. And with that being said, I'll pass the PowerPoint over to Ben.
So just to remind thank you, Director Savanon, and just to remind the public and the Planning Commission, the woman that spoke earlier made some very valid points about development and cluster development specifically. I do want to note that the Planning Commission has the right, and every cluster is different, and we review these on case-by-case basis based on the merits under which the application is in front of us. This is not a by right development. The Planning Commission has discretion. Ultimately, this goes to City Council. I will show the parallel plan that the applicant could build. There, the Planning Commission really does not have discretion. That is a by right development. The applicant could come in tomorrow, submit at that, it would come to the Planning Commission. If it meets all the ordinance requirements, you would approve it. This case before you tonight, though, the Planning Commission does have discretion. What the Planning Commission is asked to do is weigh the benefits of the parallel plan compared to what could be done in the cluster plan and make a determination if it meets the standards of the cluster ordinance. So that's just the groundwork that I want to lay tonight going into the discussion. So as Director Savanon noted, the site is located just west of Livernois, north of Wattles. The applicant is seeking a cluster development of 42 single-family detached home sites. As the director noted, the property was recently sold by the school district, and the property is bounded on all four sides by single-family homes. Access to the site is going to be via Hart and Webb off of Livernois. There is no access off of Paragon or Virgilia, and I will show how that will be addressed in the future. As shown by the aerial and as discussed by Director Savanon, there is an MDEQ regulated wetland on site. It's approximately 6 acres in size. In addition, the applicant has identified over 1,300 protected trees, and these are trees of high quality. They include hickory, oak, and maple. This is the by right plan I spoke about. This is the parallel site plan. I just want to reiterate, this is not what the applicant is presenting for approval tonight. This parallel plan is established to show what the base density would be if they were to submit a by right development. I do want to note that the applicant in this plan has shown a preservation of the wetland of approximately 3 acres. In theory, the applicant could show a parallel plan that removes more than the 3.1 acres of wetland, or preserves more than less than 3.1 acres. However, they would have to mitigate that off-site. So as shown, the applicant is showing the preservation of 3.1 acres on their parallel plan. Based on the parallel plan, the applicant would be allowed to do 33 units by right. That would include approximately 20% open space, which is that green area, and that would include the preservation of approximately 3.1 or so acres of wetland, mostly located in the green area identified on the screen. What the applicant is seeking approval for tonight is the cluster plan. The applicant is proposing 42 units, which is 9 units above the base parallel plan. In exchange for 9 extra units, they are doubling the open space, providing 41% versus the 20% shown on the parallel plan. They're providing 5.39 acres of preserved wetland. That's almost twice as much as what was preserved in the parallel plan. And they are preserving 561 trees that are regulated trees, and that's approximately 8,000 or so inches of preservation. You'll note in the plan in front of you, the wetland preservation and the open space is that green area. So what they've done is aligned the home sites around that to preserve as much wetland as well as open space and tree preserves as possible. When we review these cluster plans, it's important to compare the base plan with what the cluster plan can show. Under the parallel plan, which is the base plan, they can do 33 units. Again, the applicant is asking for 42 units. The largest differences between the plans are as such. First is the lot size. Under the R1B base zoning, the applicant would have to provide a minimum of 15,000 square feet lots. The applicant is showing lots that are as small as 6,600 square feet. There are some lots that are 18,000 square feet. However, the average is 9,000 or so square feet. So the difference is about a 6,000 square foot difference from what would be required under the R1B, which what the average the applicant is showing in front of us. In exchange for smaller lots, the applicant is able to preserve more of the natural features of the site. So again, almost twice as much of the wetlands being preserved, over twice as much open space is being preserved, and tree mitigation is being preserved. The applicant did not provide a count of the tree preservation of the parallel plan, but it is our assumption that it would be much less than the 561 trees or 8,000 inches of preserved area, of preserved trees. As for the cluster plan itself, it does meet all the area width and setback requirements of the R1B cluster requirements. Again, the lots average, our lots range from 6,600 square feet up to 18,000 square feet. The 6,600 square feet lots are located in this section of the development. The remaining lots that are parallel or adjacent to the other homes are some of the larger sites, home sites of the development. Again, the average lot size is over 9,000 square feet, and it does meet all the landscaping requirements of the cluster development requirements. One issue that has come up in discussion from public comment to our department is the issue of access. The applicant is proposing to access the site via Hart and Webb. In addition, they propose to improve a section of Virgilia Road, which is basically what we call an unplatted road. It's shown as on the plat map. It just has not been improved at this point. I do want to note that they are not providing or proposing any access off Paragon. There is a section of Virgilia which actually connects up to Webb, which is an unbuilt section of Virgilia. The applicant asked for a vacation of that section, and I'll talk about that here in a second. Just to orient ourselves, this road at the southern end here is Paragon. This is This is Webb at this location. The applicant is seeking a vacation of this section of unimproved Virgilia, shown in red. They're asking for that vacation to add that area that's shown in yellow to their proposed Lot 1. The area shown in red would be then given given to the property owners that are adjacent to those sections of the vacation. We have reviewed it internally from a city and staff standpoint. From a technical standpoint, we see no objections to the proposed vacation. However, this has not been vetted publicly, and the adjacent property owners to the proposed vacation have not been notified of this request to have this vacation. We do note that if the vacation is granted, the city would require that future easements, including a water main and potential of a future pedestrian connection, would be required to be placed within that vacated right-of-way. We do ask that the Planning Commission do consider the proposed street vacation and would make a recommendation to the City Council in regards to this vacation. We have raised the issue with the applicant is if the city does not decide or does not allow that vacation, he did note that he could make changes to the site plan which would not alter the base density, it would not alter the significant layout of the site, it would just remove a part of that section of that yellow area from his site plan. So if they couldn't get the vacation, it would not alter the development. The applicant is proposing 3 different housing types. There's a 1,900 square foot ranch with 3 different elevation types. I do want to note for the Planning Commission's education, these are very similar or exactly the same elevations that the Planning Commission approved as the Whispering Park development recently, which also had 3 different housing types there too. The second housing option is a 1.5 story, 2,100 square foot house, and those have 3 different elevation types. And the last is a colonial, which is a maximum of 2,700 square feet. And I believe there are 9 elevation types for the colonial. So in total, there's approximately 15 different elevation types that could be distributed through these 42 lots. One of the issues that has been discussed is the issue of the master plan. We do note that in the most recent updated master plan, this site was designated as a recreation and park recreation and open space designation. The reason for that was twofold. One, it was owned by the school district. It was our thought that it was going to be owned and potentially developed by the school district. And secondly, there was the regulated wetland on site as well as a tree cover on site. As part of the development, as I noted, the applicant is preserving over 5 acres of that wetland and preserving 41% and 561 trees. It might sound like a convoluted statement, but in review of the master plan, if this site were to be developed, in best case scenario in terms of the master plan is it remains as park and recreation open space. But the reality is we have an application for development with property rights on it. So if this were to be developed as a development, the development as a cluster as proposed, preserving that significant amount of open space, that amount of trees, and that amount of wetland is more in line with what the master plan intends for this as a recreation open space site than a parallel conventional subdivision that could be done by right on this site. So in summary, we do find that it does comply with the master plan. Because of the open space and preservation of the well and preservation of the trees, it does comply with the intent and spirit of the cluster ordinance. And because of those reasons I mentioned, we do find that it does better protect adjacent properties and it does better protect the natural resource in the site if it were done as compared to if it were done as a by right development. So we do recommend that the Planning Commission discuss the street vacation, and based on the discussion of the street vacation, we do recommend that the Planning Commission recommend approval of the development to the City Council. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Carlisle? Mr. Sullivan? Mr. Daigle?
Do you know the colonial models that were shown? Would those fit on the 6,000 or 6,600 square foot lots meet setbacks?
I have only seen the elevations for those. I've never seen the footprint for those, so I couldn't answer that question.
Okay.
Mr. Stanzik?
Well, I was curious, has our traffic consultant looked at the traffic for the proposed site and made any recommendations?
Our traffic engineer determined that a traffic study was not necessary based on the type of project proposed and the number of units proposed. Also reviewed the layout of the site and did not have any objections.
Any other questions for the Planning Commission? Would the applicant like to speak?
Good evening. My name is Joe Miniacci from Mondrian Properties. I'm very pleased to be able to present this project to you. As some of the other projects are very similar to the other school properties that we have bought in the past. I think Ben and Brett have done a great job presenting it, and if you have any questions for me, I'd be more than willing to answer.
I have a question. I wonder, we've seen you here several times now, in many projects. I wonder if you can give us an overview of some of the projects you're working on throughout the city and how many you're doing at this time.
The very first cluster option that was approved from the city of Troy, we've attained, and that's our Paradise Park, or Parkview on Beach project, which is at the corner of Long Lake and Beach. It's a very successful site. So far we have the model up, completely landscaped and fully furnished. We welcome everybody to come visit. We've sold out almost half the site right now. And those are beautiful models. The site plan is, the site's being completed with all the landscaping, and as the homes get in, we'll finish up all the remainder of the landscaping that was presented on the site plan.
Excuse me, do you self-perform all the construction?
Yes, we general contract everything ourselves. And the staff, myself included, will walk every house before closing to make sure it meets all our standards. Raintree Elm Village is the other site that we developed under the cluster option. That one is, we have our models off-site like we had said we were going to do over in the States of Willowbrook subdivision. Fully, 3 brand new models with the most up-to-date stylization and floor plans. We believe that it's very successful. We've got a ranch, a colonial, and 2 colonials. We sold 20 out of the 59 lots there. The streets are in that subdivision, and we're in the process of doing all the construction. The models, again, are fully decorated and there for your viewing. The third project, Whispering Park, we just got approved from City Council, and we're in the engineering stage right now. Some of our other developments, Estates of Willowbrook was one of the projects that we're just finishing up and completing now, which was a traditional subdivision. Mm-hmm.
Do you have a question?
Yeah. Do you have ground floor bedrooms on any of these colonials?
It's an option that we can build into by rearranging some of the floor plans, but the models right now, we do have a split level. Actually, I think if you back up, yeah, right here is the first floor, a story and a half has a first floor master bedroom.
I'm just curious, how's the ranch?
It's a beautiful ranch. I'm glad you brought it up.
Look at the model homes, and I did particularly like the ranch.
Yeah, it's one of my favorites that we've done recently. It's the first ranch we did in 20 years in the city of Troy, and it's a 2,000 square feet, 1990 square foot ranch, 3 bedrooms. We show it as a 2-bedroom and a den, geared specifically for the empty nester. Unfortunately, we haven't had any sales. We're hearing that 2,000 square feet for a ranch is a little small. And this is what we're hearing when the people come to buy the house. We're more than happy to make adjustments. The footprint is maxed out on the smaller lot sizes, so we can't make it any larger. But the feedback is everyone likes it. We haven't had any commitment to it. We are still moving forward with the product and building some spec homes, so maybe a completed house ready to move in would be more advantageous to some of the buyers out there instead of going through the building process. So,
Mr. Tig?
Will all 3 of your models fit on all of the sites for this project?
Yes, they all fit within the footprint.
I was curious, you mentioned the ranch being geared toward empty nesters. Just for the other homes, are they geared toward a different clientele than would buy a traditional subdivision home?
These are 4-bedroom colonials. Our colonial is our biggest seller, and it's geared to your traditional buyer in the community right now. Like I said, that's our biggest seller right now. The ranch, we show it as an empty nester home, but it actually fits perfect for a starter home as well because of just the first floor. Everything's on one floor. It's really nice floor plan. Big open spaces, has all the bells and whistles. It's definitely a premium looking home.
Right.
So.
And in terms of the clientele, do you find when you evaluate a cluster versus a traditional development, are you seeing more demand for the clusters? You mentioned buying those school properties and doing several cluster developments there. So I was just wondering the thought process behind that.
I'm not sure if it's hard to compare them side by side because right now that's all we have is cluster option homes or cluster developments versus your traditional. We're one of the largest builder in Troy, and we're not seeing a downturn in sales because of the cluster development, so I'm thinking it's staying with pace with what's coming around. A little less yard to maintain, a little less that, but big open spaces that everybody can enjoy.
The amenities, right.
Yeah.
Right. Thank you. Anything else for the applicant? Thank you.
Thank you.
So now I'd like to open the public hearing. But before I do that, I want to make a couple of comments up front. And a public hearing is an opportunity for residents to share their comments on a specific project with the Planning Commission. Everyone in attendance who wishes to speak will be provided an opportunity to do so. We appreciate everyone who came out tonight to share their thoughts with the Planning Commission, and we view your comments as important. However, I want to set up some ground rules so it can be an effective and efficient public hearing. So first, please begin your comments by stating your name and address for the public record. Please address all comments to the Planning Commission. Please be respectful of the Planning Commission, the staff and the consultant, the applicants, and those in attendance. This is an opportunity for residents to provide comment, but it's not a discussion or a debate. We ask that those in attendance refrain from talking, clapping, cheering during the meeting, and ask that all comments this evening relate to the specific item that is being considered. And then finally, just so that everyone gets a chance to speak, we ask that you limit your comments to 3 minutes. So with that, I'd like to open the public hearing and ask if anyone wants to come forward to speak.
Keith Luma, 185 Hart Avenue, Troy, Michigan. I want to thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak. Personally, from my standpoint, I live in that house right there, second from the last house on Hart. I think it's a good and a bad thing that this gets developed. Quite frankly, that wooded area, we've lived in this house since it was built in '71, is overgrown. It's bug infested. Yeah, there are a lot of deer and a lot of wildlife in there, but you can't enjoy them until they come in your front yard. My biggest concern with this entire development, and I think it's unfortunate that the traffic engineer chose not to do a traffic study, is the increased traffic on these two side streets, particularly Hart Avenue. We barely have enough paved road on that street for our own resident vehicles to be able to get up and down that street, especially with the bus lot there. I really think that needs to be reconsidered. There's no other way to really widen the street. There's no room. There's no provision for sidewalks on either one of those streets for people to walk down. We're going to have excess traffic coming in and out, and I think it's going to be a serious issue with the residents who live on those two streets. Then you couple that with the increased traffic that's coming through there with construction. It's going to be a living nightmare for the residents on those streets for the 2 to 3 years that they're going to be, that could possibly be developing this and tearing it down. I think you should reconsider doing a traffic study on the street. I think it's necessary. It hasn't been explained at all to the residents as far as what's going to go. Like I said, you even brought it up just a few months ago. We were told that was going to be a daycare center. Then out of nowhere, certain residents got letters in the mail that, oh, we're tearing your woods down and we're building, a 42-unit complex back there that is going to increase traffic on the street. So if we can look into that, that would be great. I would suggest that all of you come to Hart Avenue during the school year when those buses are running and try and get down that street. I know you can't do anything about the school bus lot being there because they're their own omnipotent entity, but you need to actually get there and see what the residents have to deal with on a daily basis. Drive up and down those streets. We have street side parking. If someone's parking on the street, there is no way that cars are going to be able to, that increased amount of traffic is going to be able to get through those streets. It's a very unwise decision not to look into that. And that's all I have to say. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to speak? Yes.
Good evening. My name is Brad Samuel Jedney. I live at 139 Webb. I concur with what this gentleman says. Our street recently, I believe 3-4 years ago, had culverts put in, and just the other day there were some construction crew from the city of Troy there cleaning out some sewer basins, and they measured the street and told me it was 20 foot wide, and they even laughed because they saw my dually truck could barely get by with a car parked across the street from my house. It was also brought to my attention that Webb is a street that's grandfathered in, that we are allowed to park on both sides of the street, and if we do so, there's no way you can get a car between each parked vehicle. We have no sidewalks, again, agreeing with the gentleman. My kids, we had to walk to Livernois and Webb to be picked up by the buses. From time to time, a bus would make the wrong turn. Instead of going down Hart, they would turn down Webb, and you should see the joke of a bus trying to turn around on what was a dead-end street, and being politically correct now, it's a no-through street. I've lived in the house for decades, just as a school, owned that property for decades. I've been a resident for over 30 years, so I've seen change. I applaud change, and I accept change. However, when it affects me directly and my neighbors who are on 100-foot lots, if not wider, now to be told that, you know, we're going down to as low as 6,600 square feet. I'm on a 135 by 200 foot lot. That's a nice size lot. And I'm one of the bigger sizes, but I think the smallest lot on our size, or on our street, is 90 by 200. And, you know, we were gonna buy property that was vacant across kitty corner from our home, and we were told by the Planning Commission 25 years ago that we could not separate or ask for a variance because we could not meet two 100-foot side yards or 200-foot lots. And now, and again, nothing against the builder, I think he's doing a great job, or they're doing a great job, but now to limit the sizes and say it's okay to put a 6,600 square foot lot, you know, with a home on it, and just rough estimates here, 2.5 cars per home, you're looking at approximately 120 extra cars in the morning, in the afternoon, in the evening hours, along with the buses. I think, again, the study needs to be done. And in closing, I did want to bring up, well, I've got a list of things, but I want to limit the 3 minutes here too. But Virgilia, I talked with a number of individuals at the school board, and I was told they vacated their project because they couldn't get access through Virgilia. And now they want to open up Virgilia. I don't understand how the city is going to, condemn two people's side yards and then say, okay, to the builder to put a street through there? I just don't get it, folks. I hope you do your due diligence, look at it, and I'm sorry, I'm kind of a little gun shy when talking in front of people, but at the same note, the lady here, she mentions that people bought, or the developer bought the property, we didn't even know about it, and all of a sudden, here they are assuming they're building on it, making plans for it. Why do you spend that kind of money knowing that you can't do anything with it?
Thank you.
Yep, thank you.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Can I just clarify one thing? Because I want to make sure that the information is accurate. Virgilia is not being proposed to be paved and be opened up. I just want that to be clear for the record so that more speakers that come don't hammer on that point. It is not proposed. There's discussion of vacating it so it's no longer a public right-of-way, but there's no application to pave Virgilia to connect to Paragon.
And I think if it's vacated, it cannot be paved. Is that correct?
I want to be, so this is Virgilia. Virgilia was what's called a paper street, and right now This whole section here it's platted, but it's not developed. So the developer's proposing to pave this portion of Virgilia, but not to connect to Paragon down here.
Sir,
If the vacation does go through, what is now this section of Virgilia would then be given to each adjacent property owner, so there would never be a street that would then connect in the future. If it's not vacated, there is the potential that at some point the city could put in a street at that location.
Thanks for the clarification.
However, it's been platted as a platted street for, I don't know, 70 years, and it's never been paved. So I just want to make that clear.
Excuse me, real quick. There is a subdivision, Carlson, that is open to the condominiums or the condos that were built to the far west of that lot. Could that not be used as an entrance and exit? And if I'm not mistaken, on the furthest west side of Paragon, there is a unusually large sidewalk with cement posts put in for flow. Now, I don't know if that's wide enough to put a street in or not, but there's already an access to Carlson.
Just to clarify, right, it's not a debate, and I want the other gentleman to have his opportunity to speak. Yes, sir.
How's it going? I'm Tim Hughes. I'm at 227 Webb, the corner. Pretty much my same concern is the traffic. You know, we just got the house, so, you know, but with the street being next door and all the buses, with him saying that they have bad traffic, that only makes me more nervous because people are going to avoid that street then and just keep coming down the line. And, you know, we got 3 kids, so, you know, we don't have to worry about traffic right now. So, yeah, my main concern is putting 42 houses in that is, just the traffic. That's my main concern. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Yes.
My name is Debbie Hagelstein, and I live at 224 Webb, which is across the street from them. And traffic. I can't even hardly get down the street now. The other day, there was a car parked there, and somebody put their garbage out, and I had to go weaving around. How are you ever going to have these cars going through and parking? And I agree, if the buses are an issue on Hart, if you had a choice, what street would you take? And we're right on the corner, and there's kids, and traffic is going to be absolutely, I don't even know how the builders are going to get their machinery down there to get in to be able to build the houses. It's going to be horrific. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Good evening. My name is Christine Gaunt. I live at 316 Paragon, which is the second house off of the hopefully vacated Virgilia. And my question is, you know, I've lived here 47 years. I've enjoyed the wildlife behind me. And my question is there provision for any kind of a buffer zone between the back of our property and what's going to be built in the new subdivision, or does city ordinance allow to have it just butt right up to, you know, our fence lines? That might be a question for the builder, I'm not sure. But I can only tell you how glad I am Virgilia is not being put through. I really feel for the people on Hart and Webb, because I know this is going to be a hardship for them. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Hello, my name is Kevin Phillips. I'm at 388 Paragon. I understand I'm not allowed to ask questions, but I'm a little confused on the zoning It was zoned as recreational, which implies open use to the public. If you look at this plan, I wouldn't really call that preserving green space, I would call it sequestering it. Are the people in that area going to have access to that land? The people that have access to it now? Or is it sealed off for the new residents who have not yet paid taxes, who have not elected anybody on city council, are just coming in and they get that benefit to themselves? I had another point, but now I've lost it. I guess that's it. The land, oh, I know what I was going to say. So when I purchased my house, that was supposed to be a school. I perceive a school in my backyard as a benefit, a great benefit. People with young children want to buy a house with an elementary school in the backyard. Now I get a house twice as big as mine in the backyard. I don't think very many people want to buy my house right now. So is there any kind of compensation plan for people that see their property values go down? Or do we just get this because the city changed their direction from school to let's develop? Thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone else want to make a comment? I'll close the public hearing. And bring it back to the table for Planning Commission comment. Yes, Mr. Hudson.
I'm not sure who to direct this to, either Mr. Miniacci or Ben or Brent, but how wide is Hart and Webb?
The right-of-way on Webb and Hart is approximately 50 foot in width. The pavement varies approximately from 20 to 24 feet depending on where you are in that location.
Most of our private roads are at least a minimum of 28, aren't they?
Most of private roads, most are public, so the right-of-way for a private road is 40 feet, and the right-of-way for a public road is 60 feet. The pavement in a public or private road ideally is 28 feet.
Okay. Are these public roads, Webb and Hart?
Hart and Webb are public roads.
Okay. Is there property available to widen those two roads?
The simple answer is yes. There is approximately, so take 50 feet minus 20, there's approximately 15, say if the road's center, there's 15 feet on either side of the road. That's the simple answer. The more complex answer is there's a culvert there, there's utilities in the location, there's other variables that would potentially be very expensive to relocate or move. However, there is the potential in terms of physical area where they would not have to take additional property to expand both Webb and Hart. If it was warranted by the engineering department, which in their review didn't find that there was the need to improve those roads based upon the development that's submitted in front of us tonight.
I guess I am a little concerned about the width of that existing road with traffic and even construction equipment coming in. I was in favor of this project, but I'm kind of wavering right now because of the roads. And maybe we ought to take another look at the roads. That's all I've got.
Mr. Quinn.
I'd like to piggyback on Mr. Hudson's comment. I would say there should be a traffic study, as one resident commented, to see if the additional 44 residents during whatever hours would create any kind of sizable backups on that street. I have no idea. I don't want to express a comment because I'm not an expert in it. But and the other question, the other part of that is there a grandfathering of parking on both sides? I've never heard of that before, but if you could look into that and give us some comment back on that. To me, it's inconceivable to have parking on both sides of a 20-foot wide road.
Ms. Cooper.
Several questions. First, I'd like to piggyback. I agree. I think a couple of planning commission meetings ago, I had asked, maybe 3 meetings ago, I had asked if Mr. Hootery or we could have some conversation with the traffic engineer, because I think we see so many developments and the collective weight on our roads, on our main thoroughfares, not only on the inner roads. I'm just concerned. Is that on the docket for any upcoming meeting? Do you remember this, Mr. Savino?
I do, and he's not on the docket for an upcoming meeting.
I had offered to meet with him, but I was denied, so I would like to have him come here, is what Ms. Bloom said, is that he could come here and answer questions. So I really would appreciate if we could make that happen, because I think we have a lot of questions. Every time a development comes up, people are concerned about traffic. So I think my fellow planning commissioners would agree. I also want to ask, if we didn't do the cluster and we did the parallel plan with 33 houses, would we even have a say? No. We would not have, this would not even, I mean.
You would review it. Mm-hmm. You could make some comments on it, but in the end, if it met all the zoning requirements, you have the right. You would basically be required to approve it, and it would not go to City Council. This would be an action of the Planning Commission.
So we would have 33 houses regardless of. So whatever traffic came with the 33 houses could go through without our having any say. At least by our doing this, we are preserving more trees and having some say about how it's going to be, correct?
Yes, I mean the Planning Commission has the discretion. Ultimately the City Council has the discretion on this matter. And so what we were trying to present earlier is the Planning Commission and ultimately the City Council has the decision to make is the parallel plan at 33 units is the benefit of the cluster plan with 9 extra units, the extra open space, etc. Does that outweigh the benefits provided versus what would be done as a by right 33 unit site condominium project there? This site is zoned R1B. I just want to clarify the master plan calls this as park and recreation open space. The master plan is a policy document. The zoning ordinance is the regulatory document under which he could build. So the property rights for this development is under R1B, hence the application could be built at 33 units by right.
Thank you. That was my third question.
Did I
You answered my third question that I didn't ask, which was, that one gentleman said that this was supposed to be a school. I don't remember. I always thought it was R1B.
It's zoned R1B.
Right.
It's master plan for recreation open space. Again, schools don't have to follow local zoning or building codes. So it's essentially if a school or a school-related function, they can build that without coming to the Planning Commission or the city for any approvals, including both zoning and or building approvals. It's all done at the state. So we have no local control or local say if this was to be developed as a school, including road improvements as if it's a 400-student school.
Question for Mr. Friend. When we talk about health, safety, and welfare, when we're hearing a situation that's not the property that's in question, but it's access to the property, does that come into play? Do we have some discretion with that? I mean, because the property in and of itself, within the property lines, there may be no issues with health, safety, and welfare. But for example, and we had this come up last meeting with the development over off of Wilshire. Access to and from the property, there was some concern about the safety of that. So can you speak to that a little bit?
Sure. What my answer to that would be is, at this point, it's speculative whether or not it's a health, safety, welfare concern. I think some of the consensus here is to do the traffic study. A traffic study would help move in the direction of determining whether or not there's health, safety, and welfare issues. Because you're right, that is a consideration. Is it going to impact the health, safety, and welfare of the people in that area? But at this point, it's speculative. We can't sit here and say there is.
Yeah, my question was more general in nature, right. That if there was an issue that we felt was a safety issue.
Right, but we have to have some sort of proof or some sort of evidence that it's impacted, and a traffic study would go toward.
Yes, but there's some practical aspects of a 20-foot road with parking on both sides. It starts to play out that there could be some safety issues here. I mean, I don't know that I personally need a study to say that, yeah, that could be a problem. So I guess really what I'm going to be looking for, what are the other options here that we have before us? Because I think this is a good development. So what other options are there to help maybe overcome the issues that it appears that these already exist? And we've heard this discussion before with residents coming in. We have a problem. We don't have sidewalks. Our streets are too narrow. There's too much traffic. Before the development, any development is even brought forward. So here we are again with an issue that there's a current and existing, potentially existing problem. And is this going to impact that? Certainly will. So I guess where I would like to explore a little bit, what options do we have to help mitigate a situation that already exists, and we don't want to make it worse with a new development.
Mr. Sanzica.
I can't agree more with Mr. Hudson, Mr. Cagle, and the rest of the planning commission. It would be unconscionable to allow a development like this to proceed without improvements to Webb and Hart. And, somehow the developer, the school district, and the city will have to get together to try to do some type of apportionment to provide improvements to that road before this development goes through. So I cannot vote for this development without a study, a traffic study, and recommendations from the city engineer and from the city consultant on how whatever should be developed.
Just a question for the planning department. So was there an assessment done by the engineering department and the parking consultant that resulted in a parking study not being done?
So the site plan was circulated, and there was not a determination to move forward with a traffic study for this application. If the Planning Commission feels that there's a potential negative impact on and this needs to be studied, you can certainly postpone this item and have these issues studied by our engineering department and or our traffic consultant or the applicant's traffic consultant.
Yeah, and the reason I just posed the question is I didn't know if those things were weighed already, so that I agree with all the comments here. I heard the public comments about the concern about traffic, but I didn't know if that was already factored into the analysis. So, okay, thank you.
I think, well, I don't want to speak for the traffic engineer, so I'll stop.
Okay.
Let me stick my foot into it.
Yes, Mr. Hudson.
Hopefully it's not my mouth, but when we've had traffic studies before and parking problems, they've all, to my knowledge, been on regulated streets, 60-foot right-of-ways, and a lot of the people in the neighborhood don't like a lot of traffic. I understand that. This one appears to be a much smaller than the ordinary street in the city of Troy. It's been here probably since the Waddles came and settled in the 1800s. But I think it would be worthwhile to postpone this, to have the traffic study done, paying particular attention and focusing on the narrowness of this street and what, if anything, can be done, as Mr. Tagle says, to try and modify and get around some of the problems. At least we'll have some facts before us so we can make a decision.
Agreed. Mr. Salvador.
The standard for a 28-foot wide street, I'm going to get the year wrong, but I'm going to guess. Don't hold me to this. I believe the standard was created in 1968 for 28-foot wide. There are more substandard streets in the city than probably you think. I don't know how many miles, but it's more common than one would think in the city of Troy today. But we can certainly have, what I would suggest we do is we utilize the city's traffic consultant as an independent, so they would be working for the city as an independent, impartial expert to study this issue of what impact, if any, the width of the street will have on safety and maneuverability, et cetera. And if there is an impact, perhaps what solutions could be considered as part of this.
Yeah, especially in view of the fact that apparently everybody's parking in that street.
It certainly constricts traffic flow even more, but I think it's a good suggestion.
It constricts traffic flow. It also can calm traffic and can reduce traffic speeds. But what's the balance in terms of safety versus calming? So I'm not an expert, but our traffic consultant is.
Ms. Chris?
I hate to have to admit this, but I think I'm going to need a Planning 101 lesson because I don't understand the issue with Virgilia. You called it like a platted paper street, but I don't really understand. Because I look at this map for this diagram, and I think, wouldn't it be nice if you could include Paragon as an option somehow, some way? And then you have 3 streets that go to the sub, but Virgilia seems to be the sticking point, and I'm not really clear.
So,
what you do?
It'll be there in a second.
It's coming. You broke it again.
No, he did. Just take this.
It's up behind you, yeah.
It just takes time.
There you go.
There we go. It's up here too.
Okay.
So, historically, way back when, roads are platted and subdivisions are platted. When that's done, oftentimes the roads themselves aren't put in at the same time it's platted. Roads are put in as development occurs within those plats, so especially a long time ago when they started doing plats. What we call as a paper street is a street that is shown platted but not improved, as in there's no actually physical road in that location. That's the case we have here. You can see my red dot. Paragon, there's a right-of-way from Paragon that extends all the way north. It's what we call a paper street. It's shown on paper as a street. Right. It just has never been improved as a street. What the applicant is asking...
So there's no asphalt?
There's nothing from this part north.
It's trees.
It's trees.
It's trees. It's in a public right-of-way. It's in a City of Troy right-of-way where there's this blue line is a water main. There's a water main that runs in it, etc. But it is nothing in it other than trees.
In theory, the city could pave that tomorrow. They could. It's their right of way, and they could pave it. It hasn't been paved since this sub was platted in. Who knows when your sub was platted? 40s. That was my guess. The 40s. Hasn't been paved. It's awkward. It's hard to see here, but it's there's a jog in the.
You see there's a little jog at this location. So as part of the development, what the applicant is proposing is to vacate this red section, and then each quarter section will be given to the adjacent property owners. So they would take the area in yellow, and then they would improve and create a street, Virgilia, that would service their development as well as connect to Webb and Hart. But this section would go away, and then there would never be a street that would ever connect from Paragon to this location.
But
if a traffic study is done, the traffic study may come back and say that traffic would be improved if this is connected. We don't know what the traffic study is going to say.
Right. But I was going to say, I thought we were all about streets that connect, right? And streets that allow cars to move, freely about. Okay.
Now, I don't want to speak for the developer, so if I'm wrong, I'm confident that Mr. Maniaci is going to walk up here and correct me. He's very good at correcting me. But I believe that there was an informal meeting months ago between the developer and the neighbors, and the developer listened to the comments of the neighbors concerned with the potential connection to Paragon from this development. So one of the reasons that portion is proposed to have a portion of a unit put on it is it makes it impossible to utilize it as a road. So it was an attempt to appease the neighbors who were very concerned about this potential connection. You heard Mr. Carlisle indicate that if this vacation becomes too complicated, or someone's opposed to it for whatever reason, he has the ability to potentially push that portion of that unit to the west, kind of scooch everything over, not really affect the layout of the development, really not affect the percentage of open space significantly, still leave that unimproved, but wouldn't require the vacation of that portion of Virgilia. It's the first time I've been here 16 years, it's the first time that an applicant has bundled a vacation as part of a development, and it's somewhat confusing. It is.
So then, just to make sure I completely understand, we could have this development in the parallel plan by right. Period, dot, doesn't matter about Webb or Hart. It's just going in. It's only because we're looking at it as a cluster development then that we can ask for the traffic studies, that we can take a look at that strip of Virgilia and determine what could go on there or vacate it. Matt, you're giving me the skeptical look on the Virgilia one.
I think I don't want to trump our attorney is also good at correcting me. I think if we agree that there are potential traffic impacts with a 42-unit cluster development, we would also agree that there are the potential impacts of a 33-unit site condominium. The concerns are the same, the volume is just slightly less. So those concerns, based on the fact that it is a substandard street, based on our 28-foot standard, that the concern would be comparable for the 33 as well as the 42.
Right.
This is, so, when we say by right, we talk about what's inside the lot boundaries. The impacts of that by right, they still have to mitigate the potential impacts of that development if it warrants the necessary requirements, such as improving the street, etc. So that's regardless if it's a by right development and or a cluster development, they still have to mitigate the impacts if it's warranted. The difference is simply what happens within those lot lines, whether the planning commission and ultimately the council's discretion or you don't.
Mr. Hudson? Yes, I'd like to say something.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, recognizing you. Yeah.
Listen to this conversation, and I think maybe I can give it a Reader's Digest version of some options. The developer has an option of going with the parallel plan, putting in 33 homes, making a road development. He's not going to be concerned, doesn't have to be concerned about the roads or anything else. I think the cluster plan is a much more amenable project. It's going to be more attractive. It preserves open space, and for those who like deer, you're probably going to keep your deer in there, and maybe we can kill the bugs. But he'd probably have to go through somersaults if we're able to talk about the streets in here. And if I'm reading all the conversation I hear, the city hasn't done anything for 70 years, and they're probably not going to do anything in the future for this project. But all in all, I think it's a concern. I'd like to see a traffic study, but I think ultimately the cluster plan is better for this city and the neighbors than the parallel plan.
When you got a minute. Mr. Brett? Yeah, I agree with Mr. Hudson. I think the cluster development is a better plan, mainly for, you saw the numbers, the actual numbers of the increased amount of open space. The setbacks from the adjoining neighbors are the same, that 45 foot. My big concern, along with yours, is the traffic. And my thought is, if you opened up that part of Virgilia to connect with Waddles, you're going to have a lot less traffic going down Webb and Hart if we can bring the traffic out of that subdivision right down to Waddles and also on Paragon. So although Paragon's going to suffer a little, residents on Virgilia are going to suffer a little bit, but it's less of a suffering for the intensity of suffering for Webb and Hart. So I would say, if that traffic study could look at those 4 street access to that new development as opposed to just 2 streets. I'd like to see what they say about that, because it would lessen the burden of Webb and Hart if both the other 2 streets participate, especially Virgilia getting into right into Waddles. That's a major artery, and it'll be, I think, beneficial for all the residents, the smaller streets, to have that happen.
So,
Ms. Cooper.
I'd like to say I prefer the layouts of these cluster housing compared to the last one that came before us that we turned down. I think there were like 3,700 square foot houses. There was one that came, and I think these are more in line with the sizes of the houses that we intended when we asked for the cluster. We wanted smaller homes for either empty nesters or starter homes. And I think that that's what this provides, as opposed to the cluster that came before us earlier that we postponed. I don't remember what we did, but these are better suited to what we were aiming for with the clusters.
Ms. Cruz?
I was just going to follow up with Mr. Krent. I would like to be able to find a path to yes on this development. I prefer the cluster over the parallel plan, obviously for the reasons stated. And it would be nice if we could get some more empty nester housing, smaller homes, and have a mix in the neighborhoods of all age groups. I always think that that's a good thing for everyone that gets to be a community in that respect. So I would encourage that we go ahead and do the traffic study and figure out if we can't find a path to yes on this. Because I'm going to tell you, on Hart Street with the school buses, that is 9 months a year. That's 2/3 of the year of those big buses running up and down that street all day long with elementary, middle, and high school transportation needs.
It seems like we have a consensus on the next step, so feels like we're ready for a motion. So,
Mr. Hudson.
All right. I would move that this planning commission adjourn the hearing tonight to the date to be set, and that in the meantime, the city engineer and traffic man conduct a study of the streets in this project and give us a recommendation as to what they find.
Do you want to include the specific things that we want the traffic engineer to study, or is it broad enough?
I'm open to items if you want to put them in.
I'd like to include opening up Virgilia to Waddles, from the development all the way down to Waddles.
is that something that the traffic study would look at just in general, or would we need to direct them to look at it?
We can direct them to study that. I mean, Mr. Krant is not making a recommendation about the development. He's suggesting that when the traffic consultant reviews the potential issues, that one of the issues would be the potential for a connection here.
That's correct.
I don't think we want to get too specific, though, in our recommendations, because we're not experts, and we want the traffic engineer to look at it
holistically.
But I want them to include...
Yeah.
I understand, but I don't want to go down and get in the weeds of what we're directing them to do.
I just don't want them to avoid looking at it.
Right. Noted.
Do you need support of that motion?
So
I guess I'm done.
Are you done?
Yeah.
I'll support that. Second.
Sorry, I think we're ready for the vote.
Mr. Faison?
Yes.
Mr. Hudson?
Yes.
Mr. Krantz?
Yes.
Ms. Koopa?
Yes.
Mr. Zanzika?
Yes.
Mr. Chagel?
Yes.
Ms. Cruz?
Yes.
Motion passes. Item number 6 on the agenda is public comment for items on the current agenda. Are there any comments for items on the current agenda? Seeing none, I'll go to item number 7, Planning Commission comments. And I'll start with Mr. Zanzika.
Well, I'm pleased how this item was resolved. We're going to do a traffic study, and I think the one that really benefited from the lack of any study on this is the school district. When they sold the property, they didn't consider any access to that property, and that's really, with the school bus yard there, and to me, that's really a shortcoming on the consideration. I'm sure if they do have improve those roads, there'll be a special assessment. I would hope this school board will be an active participant in the assessment. But on another note, I just wanted to, I know Don Evans is in the hospital, and he's probably listening to to our meeting tonight. I'm sure he'll be proud of how we came up with this last proposal. But I just wish him the best and a speedy recovery.
Thanks for that. Ms. Cooper?
I guess I'd like to just say that I'm also glad that we resolved it this way, but I do think that we have to talk about, as we have these, whether it's cluster or any kind of development on these private properties that people are deciding what to do with their private property, we need to understand the impact on the schools and on traffic. And we need Mr. Hootery here, I think, to ask him some questions. I would be happy to see him here sooner rather than later.
Ms. Cruz.
Just a couple of things. Again, I'm going to suggest that we continue to offer as much education to the public as we can. Again, the comments that I heard in tonight's first speaker, I mean, there's a theme. There's a theme, and we need to address the theme to make sure that people understand why we are making the decisions that we are. I mean, they don't have to agree with them, but I would like for them to understand them. And the thought had occurred to me, and I'm just going to throw it out there. I don't necessarily want anyone to comment on it, but I would say that I would be willing to give some of my time back to the city in a town hall environment where we could have like a 2-hour question and answer session with your planning commission for people who might want to come and just raise their hand and ask the random questions. And so just chew on that. But that would be something that I would be willing to do. And then my last comment is, I was on Rochester Road this week, and I don't know how it is that I live in the city of Troy, and yet I'm not on Rochester Road for very long, but I was on it from Big Beaver up to Long Lake. The signs. The signs. We gotta do something about it. It just looks terrible. We gotta do something about the signs. I'll just beat that horse some more. The signs. So I know that's not our responsibility, but we want to be proud of our city. That little stretch doesn't make me proud. So, thank you.
Just want to say to the residents still here in that area of discussion tonight that I'm sure you're pleased that the school didn't develop that as early learning and have 400 vehicles going back and forth every day on those 2 streets, because we would have no say at all in that. So that's my only comment.
Mr. Hudson?
No comment.
Mr. Tagle?
Yeah, I just want, and I don't remember who made the comment, but I want to make sure that I'm clear and that all of us are clear. When we talk about reviewing a property, whether it's by right or special use, yes, we're talking about within the boundaries of the property. But if there's access to that property, for example, that are potential safety issues, we have a say on that. So even if it's a project by right, and they've dotted all the I's and crossed the T's, if it causes implications or problems or safety or health issues outside of those 4 or 5 web property lines, we have a right to say something about it, to deal with it. So I just want to make sure that everybody understands that, because that was the case here. It was the case last month with the Wilshire project, because access through a parking lot, So again, that's all I have. Mr. Frame?
I'm going to briefly comment on Tollbrook. I don't know if anyone watched City Council last night. We do have a confidential settlement proposal. City Council chose last night not to go into closed session to discuss that, so I don't really know where the confidential settlement lies, and I can't discuss it any further than that.
Okay, thank you. Mrs. Savna?
Signs, I don't want to get into a deep discussion of signs, but you're probably referring to the relatively large signs that they're 30 feet tall, 200 square feet, LED signs. There's a number of them on Rochester Road. There's presently a moratorium on new ground-mounted signs, freestanding signs, as a result of the visual impact of those new signs that were constructed about a year ago. The city is using some in-house consultants to study the impact of those signs in terms of their potential impact on safety. And that study is ongoing now. And there'll be a presentation made in front of City Council likely within the next 4 to 6 weeks on those specific signs and all LED signs in the city in terms of their potential impact on safety. After that effort, you may see the amendment update of the City of Troy sign ordinance. I can't get into the details of it because but I do know that there will be a report on those LED signs in the relatively near future.
Thank you. And Mr. Carlisle?
No comment, thank you.
Okay, thanks. Hey, I was just going to make one comment, and it was directed to the public and the discourse we had today. I thought we had a lot of well-considered, thoughtful comments that drove the conversation here at the table, and I think we feel that we got to a good outcome, so I appreciate that. And with that, I'll close the meeting.